Hi, students. Today we're going to look at My Math, Chapter 2, Lesson 8, Estimating Products. Students will be able to estimate products by using rounding. All right, let's take a look at some examples. So when we estimate products, we can do this a few different ways. One of the ways is to round both of your factors. Another way is to round one of your factors. And then a third way is to use something called compatible numbers. So compatible numbers are numbers that are easy to work with mentally. So compatible numbers help you with mental math. And when you're estimating, it should be mental math. If you have to do a lot of work for an estimate, then it's not really going to help you. So I want to show you a few examples of how we can estimate products. Let's start off with something like 68 times 2. So in this example, one of my factors is 68 and the other factor is 2. Now 2 is a single digit. 2 is a number that is already pretty easy to work with. So I'm going to leave 2 as a 2. But what I'm going to do is change my other factor. So I want to round 68 and think of, is 68 closer to 60 or 70? Now, why did I choose those numbers? Because they both have a 0 in the ones place, which makes them easier for mental math. So if I think of a number line and I have 60 and 70, 65 would be in the middle. 68 would be right about here. So 68 is closer to 70. So I'm going to change 68 to 70 because it's close to 70, and 70 is a number that's easier to work with. So now we have the problem 70 times 2. And this goes back to what we learned the other day with multiplication patterns. So what I'm going to do in 70 times 2 is I'm going to pull out my basic fact, which is 7 times 2, and multiply that. 7 times 2 is 14. And then I count all my zeros, 1, and I add that to the right of my 14. So 70 times 2 equals 14. But remember, we were estimating the product of 68 times 2. I'm not going to put an equal sign here because 68 times 2 does not equal 140. I'm going to use that symbol, which means it's about 140. So in this example, I rounded one factor to get my estimate. I took 68, rounded it to 70, kept my other factor as a 2 because that's already a pretty easy number to work with, and then estimated. Let's take a look at another example. So you might have a problem that's a little more complicated. You might have something like 53 times 18. Now we just want an estimate. So we want to know what that is about. Well, 18 times tables are not something I have memorized, and neither do I have my 53s. So I want to change both factors. I want to round both factors and then multiply. So I need to think, what's 53 close to? And I want to have a 0 in my tens place. So is 53 closer to 50 or the next 10 up, which would be 60? And you could draw a number line or you could think about it. 53 is closer to 50. Now let's change 18. Remember, I want a 0 in my ones place. So is 18 going to be closer to 10 or the next 10 up, which would be 20? On a number line, 18 is closer to 20. So I've rounded both factors to get my estimate. And lastly, I need to multiply using mental math. Pull out your basic fact, 5 times 2 is 10. And then I still need to add 2 more zeros. 1, 2. So 50 times 20 equals 1,000. Our estimate for 53 times 18 is about 1,000. Notice I used these lines which tell us that it's an estimate. Okay, let's work on another one. Let's take 108 times 42. All right. Well, neither of these are really in my times table, so I'm going to round both factors. I want an estimate. So I want to think, what's 108 close to? Now, if I were to round this, I could have a couple of options. I could round it to the nearest tens or the nearest hundreds. You want to do what makes the most sense. When you estimate numbers and estimate products, you can get a different answer from the person next to you. As long as it's something that's close to what the actual product would be, then you're okay. So the way I estimate this might be a little different from the way you do it. What I would do is say that 108 is really close to a happy number. Happy numbers have zeros in them. So the happy number that's close to 108 is 100. The more zeros, the better. You could have also said it's close to 110, but then you have to be careful that you can mentally compute with 110. If you can't do mental math with 110, then don't choose that number. All right, let's change 42. I want to get a 0 in my ones place. So is 42 closer to 40 or the next 10 up, which would be 50? It's closer to 40. So now I have a basic fact of 1 times 4 is 4. And I need to count my zeros. 1, 2, 3. So 100 times 40 is 4,000. But in our problem, 108 times 42 is about 4,000. That's why we have the squiggly lines. Now, what happened if you would have picked 110? Okay, so if we had 110 for our rounded number, our rounded factor, and 40. Well, you would pull out the basic fact 11 times 4, which is 44, and you would count 2 zeros, making your estimate 4,400. And that's pretty close to 4,000. In fact, it's actually going to be closer to the exact answer. So either of these options would have been okay for your estimate. All right, let's look at one more. Now I'm going to make the numbers a little bit larger. Let's say that we have 779 times 112. And we want an estimate there. And I made both factors in the hundreds, so these are both larger numbers. Let's do some rounding. Okay? What are these numbers close to so that I can multiply mentally? 779. Well, I could round that to the tens or I could round that to the hundreds. If I rounded it to the tens, it would be 780. And if I think ahead, that would mean I have to multiply mentally with 78. Yeah, I can't do that. So I'm going to round this to the nearest hundreds. Remember, the more zeros, the better. So is 779 closer to 700 or the next 100 up, 800? Well, it's more than halfway there. 750 would be halfway. So it's closer to 800. All right, now let's look at 112. This is in the lower hundreds. So I could round it to 100 or I could round it to 200. It's definitely closer to 100. So I have 800 times 100 for my estimate. 8 times 1 is 8. And I have a total of 4 zeros to add after the 8, making my estimate 80,000. Now what you can do is check after you've made your estimate. You can use a calculator, do the actual math on here, and see if it's close. And just as a note, the larger the numbers are that you work with, then the more away it can be from the actual answer. So I'm going to calculate the actual answer for this one. 779 times 112. And I got 87,248. So 779 times 112 equals 87,248. And some people might say, well, that's 7,000 away. But it's still in a close enough area. Because we're dealing with a larger number in the 80,000s, it's okay for it to be a little farther from the actual answer. All right. I hope you found that helpful, and I will see you again for your next video. Have a great rest of your day.